jumping right into day 9 for the pantry challenge. I originally had a meal planned for today, but when I was putting the food away, the leftovers from yesterday's dinner, I had seen some stacks of containers going on, and I thought, no, we need to use up leftovers first. So I didn't thaw the meat for today's dinner. I'll do it some other time. So basically what we're gonna do when we only have little portions of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know, it's not enough to feed an entire family, but you can get creative, and we do leftover makeover days. So I'll kind of assess what we have here. My husband will kind of look what we have, and then my nephew and whoever else will be home for dinner can kind of determine what they're going to have. And so we'll kind of create, might need to use some new items to pull a meal together, but essentially these are going to be used first. This is the, you know, inspiration of dinner tonight. And so leftover makeover night tonight. I put a post on my page last week, I believe, Sunday, to discuss how week 1 was complete, and we're going into week 2, which is where we currently are. And I had mentioned some of my goals moving forward in this next week would be to use condiments, learn something new. I don't remember what the third one is, but condiments is definitely still something on my list to use. So I didn't really get around to it this week. I didn't think about the fact that I had already had my menu plan made. So this coming week, when this weekend when I do my menu plan, I'm going to start in my fridge, and I'm going to look at some of those open containers of salsas, sauces, things like that that need to be used up, and I'm going to generate my meal plan based off of that. Pantry challenge is more than just trying to clear out your cans out of your pantry. It could be focusing on your freezer, and that might be your only focus, or it could be focusing on certain things in your fridge. I really want to do a whole encompass of the, you know, different areas, if you will, of my food storage here in my home. So that will be next week, where I'm going to really focus on all of that. And so I'm interested to hear from you guys if you have any particular areas in this challenge that you're really trying to hone in on. Certainly as a big picture, of course, we're just working on using up what we have, limiting yourself at the store, if not fully, partially. Let me know the areas that you just really want to see eliminated out of your kitchen, pantry, what have you. Those condiments are definitely, like, they just grow overnight, I swear. So that's day 9. I will see you back here in the kitchen tomorrow when we are fixing dinner. Day 10 pantry challenge. So my pantry challenge, as I've stated before, my rules were not going to the grocery store with the exception of milk, heavy cream, and pop. So this week, yesterday, was the first day my husband went to the store. He had to go for something else. I don't even remember what it was. It wasn't food related. And I said, well, since you're out and you're stopping, could you just go ahead and pick up 2 gallons of milk? We freeze one, and then we have one in the fridge, and then pick up a couple things of heavy cream, and that should get me through heavy cream wise for quite a while, unless I get into the mood of cooking something that uses, you know, a lot of heavy cream, desserts, Cool Whip, things like that. So any event, we won't need to stop at the grocery store now for probably 2 to 3 weeks. That was the first stop. we kept to the rules for that pantry challenge, and so we got those and we're good there. The other, maybe not so much rules, but my goals with the pantry challenge is to broaden my skill set in an area and make a new recipe, and try something new. So I'm kind of encompassing all of those in tonight's dinner. I have had this in my closet over here for a year and I've not yet used it. When I did my research on this recipe, I'm not sure why it dinged in my head, but that light bulb went off and I thought, I'm gonna try it for the first time. Some of you may be familiar. This is, well, it's not the name brand, but essentially what I'm doing is called sous vide. And what I'm going to do, this here makes your water a certain temperature to slowly cook the meat. What we are doing essentially is called the reverse sear method. Typically when cooking meat, first thing you do is give it a good sear on your cooktop. Then you might slowly cook it in the oven, or it's such a quick sear that essentially like a steak, it'll cook in the matter of a couple minutes. That concept is also good for what we're having today, which is pork chops, except pork chops are, I love pork chops, but they are actually my least favorite cut of meat to work with because in the blink of an eye, they can get overcooked. And a lot of people, including my daughter, thinks she does not like pork chops because they generally are overcooked. They're dry, and that's not a very pleasurable dining experience. So you verge the risk of undercooking to have a moist pork chop, but I wouldn't recommend that because it's not like a steak that you can order medium rare. You really need your pork cooked all the way through to the proper temperature. So that's what I'm doing today. Now the recipe I chose is actually also a brand new recipe. What I did from Christmas and New Year's, I always have snacking boards, and part of that snacking board was not, this isn't the actual name brand, but I know a lot of you will know it by, I don't even know if it's pronounced, is it Boursin? It's the cheese that essentially looks like a whipped cream cheese, but I think it's some sort of a soft cheese spread, and it's flavored. This one happens to be, I think, just like a garlic, onion, herb or something like that. I also had a ton of other different dips, including hummus, artichoke dip, stuff like that. So my goal is to get those used up so that they don't go to waste, and I've managed to get through all of them except the Boursin. I tried it just a couple days ago, which is why there's a little bit left. We didn't eat it during the holidays actually, so but I figured I better try it because if I don't like it, I'm not going to try and find a way to use it up, but it's good. I also know I've seen recipes where you can make a pasta dish from that cheese, and although I'm sure that's very good, that's just never been a dish that has really screamed to me. I don't know why. I'm sure it's good. It just doesn't seem like something that I would want to make. So I saw, and I will link this down below, a recipe for Boursin pork chops. So I read through that recipe, and basically what you're doing is searing your pork chop, and then you're going to use this to make like a cream sauce. So I thought, well, I'm going to sous vide it, try that for the first time, try this recipe for the first time, broaden my skill set by using some new equipment and hopefully cooking a pork chop that will sort of enlighten all of us on a new world of delicious pork chops. So what I've done already is season my pork chops. In order to sous vide, if you're not familiar, you want to put your meat in a bag. It could be a vacuum seal bag like what I'm going to do because I have a bunch of those on hand, or you could just put them in a Ziploc bag and just push out as much air as possible. And we'll get our pot here filled with water, and then we'll see what the next step is from there. So I'm going to place 2 pork chops into each of these bags here. You are welcome to season your pork chops however which way you want to. I used onion powder, garlic powder, seasoning salt, paprika, pepper, and then I'm going to put in a little bit of thyme and tabs of butter into each bag before vacuum sealing them. Now this is not like slow cooking. It is not like using a slow cooker. In a slow cooker, your meat essentially is cooking in a bunch of liquid. The sous vide uses water to keep a constant, consistent temperature. It's heating the bag, which therefore inside that bag, anything that's in there is going to be heated, but it isn't actually submerged in water. So you get a much different outcome than you would cooking in a slow cooker, which is what in this case helps to create a tender cut of meat, but it isn't going to like shred and fall apart, much like what would happen if you cooked meat actually in some sort of a liquid. That's my understanding of it. I always suggest everyone go down into the comment section and see what other people have to say, because you guys always offer really great tips, suggestions, and just words of wisdom. And anyone who's familiar with doing this, I'm certain will provide me with a lot of suggestions and tips that I most definitely would appreciate, because I'm brand new to this. So definitely get some wisdom from down in that comment section. Okay, so here's the pork chops inside my bag, and you can see I just have those 2 tabs of butter. The recipe suggested when I was researching sous vide pork chops, they were doing their own, you know, little selection, but they talked about putting some butter in there, and I thought that's a fantastic idea. So I'm going to get these closed up. Okay, so we're going to see if this pot here is big enough, if it's tall enough, because I need to be able to get my bags here submerged into the water, but the device has a minimum and maximum line of where your water line needs to be, and I'm right there at that minimum mark, and once I put these in here, I expect that water to rise. So I might end up having to get a different pot. Let's see. Also, in the past, I've seen people do, I think we might be okay. I've seen people do this, and sometimes people like clothespin their bags to the side. Let me know if that's something that has to be done, because I'm not doing that today. I'm wondering if that's going to be a problem. I'm also starting with hot water. Coincidentally, it's funny how, I don't know, this wants to float, but my other one's, the way it's laid, there we go. Well, I think that should be fine. Coincidentally, I watched a video this morning behind a little bit on her uploads. Do you guys watch Audrey from Pursuit of Simplicity? She just did something with her sous vide, and I was like, oh man, that's too funny. I'm doing this today too. And she recommended starting with hot water, because that won't take as long then for your temperature to get to whatever temperature you set it at. I thought that was a helpful tip, so I'm passing that along to you. Let's get her plugged in. Okay. So basically, now so my water temperature is already at 117 degrees. So let's set it to 140, which is the recipe suggestion that I'm using, is 140 for 2 hours. We'll put a time on. Two hours, and it's starting. Okay, so basically when this is done, I then am going to get my frying pan out, and then I'm just going to get my cast iron really hot, get some oil or butter, something down in there, and you're just gonna give it a quick sear. We not only visually eat with our mouth, but we not only eat with our mouth, but we visually eat with our eyes. And we just want that really good sear, not just because our eyes are expecting it, and that's kind of what draws us to certain types of cuts of meat, but it provides a lot of flavor to it. It locks in the taste, keeps your meat moist. So we're gonna do that, which is why it's a reverse sear method. Okay, along with dinner tonight, I actually haven't decided what I'm going to serve it with. So when I'm plating up dinner, you'll see what I decide. I'm in between potatoes and rice. So I'll bring you back in 2 hours and we'll see what we have. Just wanted to notate here that the 2 hours that I set on the timer does not begin until it reaches the temperature that you set it at. So keep that in mind. It took about 10 to 15 minutes for it to get to temperature, which now I really understand the recommendation of starting with hot water just to begin with. So it's not that much longer in trying to get your water up to temperature. So the 2 hour time has officially begun. And I'm excited to see what the results are. Once I took them out of the sous vide, I have my skillet hot and ready for me to sear. I will say these actually look really good coming just straight out of the bag. I don't know what I was expecting, but they look a lot better, I think, than what I was thinking they would. So I just threw these into a pan and just let them sear up for less than a minute or so per side, because again, you don't want to do too long to risk overcooking your pork chops. And then with the onions and olive oil left in that skillet, and then of course some of the bits from browning the pork chops, I went ahead and added that Boursin cheese. I used some of my pork stock in this dish to thin it out to a consistency that we enjoyed, that would be able to pour over our pork chops. I will say, all in all, the pork chops were amazing. We really, really enjoyed these. I will use this again for pork chops. I wasn't a fan of the sauce. I won't make the sauce again. We used the homegrown Japanese sweet potatoes, homegrown butternut squash, and some leftover naan bread, and that was our dinner. I'll see you in the kitchen tomorrow when I am cooking dinner. Saturday, January 11th, closing out the second week of the Pantry Challenge. I am getting dinner started. It's about 3 o'clock, and it's a dinner that's going to take some time in the oven to complete. I'm using a cut of meat that my family is less familiar with. It's not one of my favorite cuts to cook with, but I'm hoping this recipe kind of changes our mind, because I am going to a tried and true, good and faithful recipe, going back to the OG of Food Network and trying one of Ina Garten's recipes. I am using short ribs from the freezer. I have 6 in total here. I'm going to start off by just getting them dried, drizzle some olive oil, sprinkle with salt and pepper, and then we're gonna get them roasted in the oven for about 20-25 minutes at 425 degrees. After pouring the wine in, I'm gonna let that simmer about 10 minutes. That's gonna help to cook out some of the alcohol that gives you any dish that you're using wine. If you don't give it ample time to sort of cook out, it's going to taste very alarmingly, in my opinion, like wine. Using wine can add a very wonderful depth of flavor. It's this deep, rich, that typically as an adult, most of us can place that as being some wine. However, that is very different than eating something where wine is being used and you don't cook out that wine. I've done it in the past when, you know, I was still kind of new with cooking. You don't give it ample time. I think I made a roast and I'm like, oh, this is just not good. It was way too strong. And that was my error. So definitely give ample time to cook out, and you're looking to sort of reduce the amount of liquid that's in there. And so about 10 minutes or so. You notice that I used my dehydrated carrots and some more of those freeze-dried leeks, because of course I don't have any fresh on hand. I allowed everything to soak while I had the beef in the oven, and that was sufficient enough time. My leeks are freeze-dried, so those hydrate much more quickly than a dehydrated form of food. It also requires a lot less water. But nevertheless, those were both taken care of before I actually needed them. This recipe does also call for celery. Not in my dishes. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you know I do not like celery. So I don't have it in any form in the house. I just omit it. But when I link the recipe down below, you will see that of course it is in there, and if you like celery, then of course add it. Something I am not familiar with at all, smells good, is beer. So beer is not something I'm familiar with. Wine I know a thing or two about. this recipe calls for both wine and a beer. It calls for a Guinness. I don't have that. I have lager and some other drinking type of beers for when we have company. So I don't know if this is going to be a mistake or not. I did my best to try and research, you know, is a lager a good substitute for Guinness? And I didn't really get any solid answer. I got some people saying, you know, a lager is this and Guinness is that, and then I had where people use a lager for this foods and Guinness, you know. I don't really have an answer to that. Perhaps maybe you know and you can let me know, even though by the time this is aired, I'm gonna figure out already if this was a mistake or not. So it does call for that, so I just have that opened and ready to pour in beef stock, and it says a cup of crushed tomato. I'm just gonna do a pint because I don't wanna reserve any for another time. Little bit of thyme, speaking of, a little bit of thyme calls for 6 sprigs of fresh thyme. I of course don't have fresh, so I will use dried. Just fall off the bone tender. I used just a little bit of the reserved broth to then thicken it up to make a gravy to pour over. I used your guys' suggestion from my pantry tour video with the canned spinach, and so I did go ahead and attempt to make a creamed spinach out of it. So that's what's in this dish right here, and I added some cheese to it. I don't know yet, it doesn't look good, but I'm hoping it'll taste good anyway. Mashed potatoes, and then I did some green beans and squash from the freezer because I feel like I have an endless supply of green beans from this past year's harvest. It was never ending. So basically that's the vegetable of choosing most nights, and that's it. That's all plated up. Looks fantastic. It smells amazing. Was more or less simple to make. So I look forward to going and sitting down and enjoying this. That ends week 2 of the Pantry Challenge meals, and so tomorrow being Sunday starts a new week for me. Let me know down in the comments how you have been doing. What were your struggles this week, if any? Or tell me something good that happened. I've had someone comment that they had a unplanned event that they had to make a dish for, and they were able to stick to their Pantry Challenge in order to make that meal, which is fantastic. So let me know how everything's going for you. Please like, comment, and share my videos, and I will see you in the kitchen tomorrow.